Hello and welcome to State of the Project Meros. This is the April edition. I am your host, Cryptosi, and I am joined by the man himself, my partner in crime, the Robin to my Batman, Kayaba. Kayaba, how are you, sir? Okay,
Doing good. It's great to be here.
excellent. Before we get started, I just want to make my apologies for my backdrop. I'm not in my usual plush surroundings in Cryptosi Castle. I've decided, in solidarity with the proletariat, that I am going to come to a working class stage. And the choices were between doing it in this warehouse or recording in front of my Lambo. And because Kaiba's a humble man, Kaiba decided that we should record not in front of my Lambo. Kaiba, that was a great.
Oh, like you even have a Lambo.
I've got 3 Lambos. Thank you very much. I just parked them at.
I would believe you have three posters of Lamborghinis.
I just
I would
parked them.
believe you had three posters.
I just parked them at my other castle. That's why you've not seen them. I parked them at my other castle. So,
You Europeans and castles.
so, State of the Project Meros, for those who have not watched this podcast before or listened to this podcast before, it's basically a rundown of the current happenings within the Meros project. We've been doing this for well over 2 years now. Every month, luckily, Kayaba donates his time to keep the transparency on the project. There are no private, well, there may be private repos, but there are public. Are there private repos, Kayaba? Do you have any private repos for?
No, I can't. I don't know of any private repo
No.
we have. I mean, sometimes I forget to push up my latest work, so it's there on my computer for a few hours, but I wouldn't call that private.
No.
But no,
So-
I'm not live streaming every single line I write. But yeah.
But basically, everything is kind of being produced in the open, so a lot of the code is being pushed to public repo straight away. But for most
all
of us,
of it, but yeah.
all of it, yes. So, but for most of us, we can't understand the code, so we get Kayaba on here. I ask him loads of really tough questions, and he does his best not to call me an idiot and to answer them. So, Kayaba, thank you very much for that. And without any
You're
further
not an
ado,
idiot, Cryptosi.
I know I'm not. My mum says I'm very smart. Let's get started. Okay, so as I was looking through the issues, I'm going to start with GitHub straight away. So as I was looking through the issues this month doing my research, I noticed that a lot of the issues were features posing as issues. This is kind of like a bit of a different trend to what we've been seeing over the last few years, where we had issues that were actually issues, a lot of them critical or protocol. Is this a sign that we're getting closer to launch? Are the issues now more nitpicking and about you being a perfectionist, or am I reading that wrong? There's only 6 critical protocol issues remaining, or that I could see. There might have been some that I missed, and some of them are kind of interlinked. So I feel like some of them you could have probably wrapped up into one issue. So yeah. So basically, is this a sign that we're coming closer to launch? Is that something that I'm reading correctly?
Right, so now that we have fewer issues, it's definitely easier just to create an issue per feature, because we wouldn't be flooded with hundreds of new issues, but we'd be flooded with a few, which isn't a flood. But generally, when I create an issue for a feature, it's because I want to track it, because there's a lot of complexities, and I just want to write down my thoughts because I've been having them privately, or because I'm actively working on it and I want to be able to link work and further expand on my current work. So there's a few things that makes a feature labeled an issue. But really, the reason it's an issue is because it's an issue that it has yet to be implemented. So there still are some features that aren't included as issues, whether it's just things I would really like to have, yet I'm putting off. I'm not listing a whole 10-year plan on there. And then there's also some protocol. Under the protocol docs, we have a list of violations, which are parts of the protocol that we don't currently implement, that we don't currently follow correctly, so on, so on. Just anything that still needs to be implemented. And not all of these violations have their own issues, but we are consolidating to just a few violations left over.
Okay. There was another thing I wanted to ask, well, kind of moving on, but we've been talking quite a lot about this new RPC, as it seems to have been the most important aspect of your work over the past, I'd say, maybe 2 months.
Definitely.
Yeah, over the last few episodes, we have discussed the RPC, but what I thought we do this month is maybe maybe not delve in as deep and cover some more generic questions for people who possibly don't understand the very basics. So, what
Sure.
exactly is an RPC, and why exactly should any end user care for it?
So I believe I've commented on this a bit before, but an RPC, it stands for Remote Procedure Call. And basically what it enables is exchanges, services, payment processors, so on and so on, to talk to a Meros node. So if we did have an RPC, if you wanted to build a payment processor, you'd have to take the Meros node. Sorry, one second. My allergies are just acting up a bit.
Okay.
You'd have to take a Meros node and directly write your payment processing code into it, which would be really difficult to do given the size and scope of the Meros node, and not at all secure, because if you make one edit by accident, you change how it functions, and it's no longer going to connect to the network. It's a very delicate balance. So an RPC means instead of directly writing a Meros node and trying to get data from it that way, you can just say, hey, I don't want to fork you, I don't want to edit you to have some custom code when you get a new block. Instead, I'm just going to ask you, hey, can I get this block? And the RPC says, hell yeah, I have that block, here you go. And it just hands over a block. So it's really a way to get data, but also a way to interact with the network. If you want to send a transaction, you don't have to say, oh, I'm a brand new Meros node and I have a transaction, here you go, bye. But you can just tell your Meros node, hey, I want to send a transaction, here's an RPC call, go send it. And the Meros node will go send it. So it's really about how apps talk to each other, and the end user is never going to see it.
Okay.
That said, it's critical for exchanges to have an accessible and easy to use and well-designed RPC so they can cleanly and quickly integrate Meros into their platform.
Okay. Looking through, there was an issue. I believe I've got it down. I'm going to put in the description below. Issue 292, and it's just basically around testing the functionality of the RPC. My question is that it seems like you've been doing a lot of RPC testing. Well, to be fair, you do a lot of all sorts of testing. Now, what I
Yep.
was really wondering is how much of this is necessary, and how do you make a compromise, or do you ever compromise between launching and testing some of the functionality which may be less than critical?
So 292 is actually the epitome of this issue because it's titled, I did pull it up myself just now, it's titled Improvements to the New RPC. And it lists several tests, and it lists one RPC route I want to add gets applied to just get the total current supply of Meros. And it lists some other aspects. And most of these, not all of them, but most of these are going to probably be done after launch. They don't change any existing behavior. If you write code with the Meros node at launch and then we implement all this, it isn't going to change said behavior. So it really is something that we can do at any point in time. And these are kind of the excessive tests, like these are effectively tested already. We already use them in other tests, and those tests behave as expected. So really, we're here to be verbose and precise and maybe test some more interesting edge cases. And what I mean by that is if you want to send funds via the RPC, because you can do that, obviously you don't want anyone to be able to send funds, so we have a password apply. And when you enter this password, we have a test. It says you have to enter a password. It has to be the right password, so on and so on. And we have a series of these tests to verify that the RPC handles all these different edge cases. We have a test that says, hey, what happens if you try to send not to an address, but to a number of all things? And that error. So we have a lot of specific tests, more than needed. And some of these specific tests have been marked as to do later just because they're not critical. We can do them after launch. And they're already implicitly tested. They're already being used elsewhere without issue. This is just a more exact way to do the test.
Awesome. Okay. That was kind of the perfect answer, really.
Thank you.
Issue number 290. This one I didn't really understand, so I was looking forward to asking you. It was titled "Peer has a live socket, but either not an entry in the live table or the peers table." I literally have no idea what this means, but it seems like it's quite serious. So could you give us a little explanation of what it is and how you plan on fixing it?
Actually, a raw error message from the Meros node. Hence why it's actually a critical error. Hence why you didn't make sense of it.
Okay.
Meros has two different network connections with every peer. It doesn't have to have both of them, but it tries to have both of them. One is the live socket. This is for all live data. Get a new block, here's the new block. Get a new transaction, here's the new transaction. But it also has a second socket, the sync socket. And the sync socket is used to get old data. Hey, I never got this transaction, but I just learned of it. Can I get this transaction? Sure, here you go. Here's this transaction. Hey, I'm new to the network. I'm looking for this block. Can I get this block? Sure, here's this block. So this separation, it has a number of advantages. Mainly, it replaced an old system called sync mode, where we would handle live data, but then one party could enter sync mode and start requesting old data. Because the thing is if you get a transaction, like if you get a new transaction, you have to know, is this live data or is it response to a sync request? And we could have used two separate bytes for that, live transaction, sync transaction. And that could have worked, but I decided to separate them out, not only to save bytes to limit the amount of network messages we have, because those two different network messages really would have been just to apply a label to it, and you would have had to handle two different. It was really just a simpler solution to keep it as one single network message, because either way it would have had the exact same data. Mm-hmm. But beyond having this one single network message, it also just made the code easier to work with, because I could pass it to one area to handle X set of features and pass it to one area to handle Y set of features when you have the two socket design. Anyways, so we have two sockets. It just makes things easier to work with in a few ways. And it's an improvement over the old mode, which did support switching between live data and sync data, but it would suspend all live data to do so, which wasn't feasible. That said, so now that I've kind of covered why we have two sockets and all that, this is saying it has a live socket, yet as far as the actual network state goes, it isn't. The live socket either A, doesn't exist. So we're like handling live data, yet what we're handling for doesn't exist. Or B, we're handling live data from a peer itself that doesn't exist. It's saying that either the entry in the list of peers with live sockets doesn't exist, or an entry in the list of peers overall doesn't exist. And that really just shouldn't happen. If we have a peer, we have a peer. So at some point, there was a mismatch in the data. Data had X, but was actually Y. Yeah. And the question is, why was that error happening? It shouldn't happen. It's a consistency issue. And it actually came up in one of our old test nets. It actually brought down a couple of nodes, if I recall correctly. But it was very infrequent and rare. So I think it's just a timing issue where it does the check for existence, then tries to work with it in panic. And in that split second, it's deleted. I'm not really sure, but it's a critical error just relating to the consistency of the network state that came up a few months ago, and I only just remembered to create the issue for it.
Okay. It sounds like that's quite a big optimization, being able to combine those network messages into one. When you were saying about combining the two network messages into one.
No, it's not only does it make the code simpler, just because you don't write out the same message handler for two different messages. I mean, optimally, you still define a single function and just have two enters for it.
Right.
But main reason we do it is because we only have 256 possible message values on a technical level, and I just want to be careful about how we use those 256.
Okay, gotcha.
That was the main reason we did it.
As you was talking there, I thought I heard you mention a term called panic. This is something that is new to me. Well, I'm not a developer, so a lot is new to me. But I was looking through the issues, and it was one of the older ones. I guess it was something that's cropped up in an older testnet, and the term was panic swallowing. Now, I don't understand what this is. I'm trying to say it with a straight face. For those of you that are watching the videos, tried to keep a genuinely straight face. Kayaba's got a brand new haircut as well, so Kayaba's looking sharp. Congratulations on that, Kayaba.
Thank you.
This panic swallowing, what exactly is it? Because it does seem like it's quite a big deal. Could you explain it?
We've definitely talked about this one before. Because this is a very old issue. Panics are when the code doesn't know what to do. Something that should have been impossible happened, and the node doesn't want to try to handle it because it already tried to and absolutely failed. When such an impossible case happens, the Meros node does something known as panic, where it says, this shouldn't have happened, it did happen, I don't know how to handle this, I'm just going to exit out. And because of the way our database works, it only actually commits the data to disk every block. So if you send an invalid transaction that somehow manages to cause a panic, and the node does panic, then it will exit out to the last block and clear the transaction in the process. So that, of course, is a DOS vector where you send malicious transactions, which cause panics and so on. And it's one of the reasons we have to be extra careful about handling data, making sure it's good, and we're not just panicking at anything that's unexpected. And no, that's one of the reasons we have so many tests. But a panic is saying something that shouldn't happen did happen. Like even with a malicious node, even with a crafted transaction that was designed to error, we couldn't handle it. Something happened. We're panicking. And panicking should shut down the node. But there is this one panic that's a false positive. It shouldn't be a reason to panic. It's saying that it couldn't make a socket connection for some reason. And if it can't make a socket connection, the node just should move on. We don't panic, or at least we shouldn't panic over something that minor, because networking is very unpredictable. So if we can't make a socket, we just can't make a socket.
Yeah.
That said, the concerning part wasn't that we were panicking there. The concerning part is that the node continued running after it. So we shouldn't have been panicking there, but we were panicking there and the node continued running. So that's the swallowing. Right. Even though we were panicking, it was still being swallowed, and that swallow meant that we wouldn't always exit when panicking. Sorry, allergies are just really bad over here.
Do you know what? I do actually remember us discussing that. I think we just didn't use the term panic swallowing, or maybe we did and it got by me. But now I remember us talking about
maybe
that before.
Not then,
yeah. Okay. Issue number 294. We're getting through pretty quickly today. Issue number 294. Wallet doesn't zero private keys.
This is definitely an interesting one.
Yeah, my understanding of private keys is that they're very important, and if you zero them, then you might be in trouble. So I don't know why you'd want to zero private keys. What is zeroing private keys, and why is it important?
So let's say we load the private key from disk, okay?
Yep.
And that means there's a copy that's unencrypted, it's usable, you can sign a transaction with it. That's great. Except what happens when you're done with it? Well, now you have a private key in memory, except it's just sitting there in memory, and it's the full private key, and if anyone were to grab it, they could use it. So, of course, to grab it, you have to have extensive system access. It's not something you can easily do. This isn't the latest exploit to rock Bitcoin. No. But it's good practice is that you have a private key in memory to zero it out after the fact. And zeroing it out after you use it just removes it from memory. So even if someone ran up to your computer, grabbed your RAM out of your computer, just like ripped it out, and then still plugged it into a power source, because RAM will disappear after a few seconds, the data on it. Even if they did that, they couldn't get your private key because you not manually, but the program zeroed it out once it was done with it, just to ensure that the random RAM thief who runs up to your computer wouldn't be able to get it, or a malicious program that was able to do it at that exact moment. But of course, if such a malicious program exists, it can probably just grab your private key whenever it is in use.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of questions about it, but it's just a good practice from a security standpoint. And it's not something we're currently doing just because it is very, very difficult to properly do, especially because we don't actually store the private key in RAM for too long. What we do store in RAM is the Mnemonic, which is like the 24-word seed that you use to recover like Bitcoin, Ethereum. It depends on the wallet you use. But we store this seed in RAM. And then there's a password. And that password is passed in over the RPC to authorize certain things. So you use your password and you create a transaction and so on. And that password is just as much of a problem because the Mnemonic plus a password can be used to recover the seed or the private key. Private key. And we can't easily zero out that private key or that password because of all the networking layers it goes through. So there's definitely things we can improve on here, but it's already a hard to exploit bug. And if you can't exploit it, there's already larger problems, but it would still be good practice to implement.
So when you say that the mnemonic is in RAM, how often is the mnemonic in RAM? And is that the way it always works? Because I was always under the impression that the mnemonic was just something that you used when you set it up as it kind of represent the private key, and then after that you kind of hid your mnemonic away and no one ever used it again.
No, if you load it into a wallet, that wallet has to have a copy of it. It's how it grabs the private key from it. Don't get me wrong. You can take a mnemonic, convert it to a private key, and just store that private key in your wallet if you wanted to. but then you could export the Mnemonic. If you enter your Mnemonic into a wallet, you can generally export it back again. So the Mnemonic is safe somewhere. And we actually keep it at RAM at all times just because of the way our code is structured. And if we did save it to disk, there would be benefits there, but then at the same time, anything with access to your disk could just grab it. Because the Mnemonic itself isn't meant to be encrypted, it's meant to be used with a password. Because when you generate a private key from a Mnemonic, you take the 24-word seed and you generate a value out of it. And then you take the password and generate a further value. So it's not necessarily meant to be encrypted, it's meant to be used with a password, and that password is meant to provide security for it. And if you were to encrypt it, you would have to encrypt it with a password, which would be kind of redundant. If you're going to have a password, you want to use it with the Mnemonic, not in the actual key file, or the file as a whole. So there's a lot of aspects to it, and having the Mnemonic not be in RAM all the time would actually help somewhat now that I think about it, because then even if you could get a RAM dump, you would get the password, but not the Mnemonic. But if you can get a RAM dump, you can easily also just access the file system. And then you can also just get it when both are in use. There's a lot of complexity, so it's really just about getting good practice in and minimizing the chances of such an event.
Okay, gotcha. Okay, my next question is, thank you for explaining that first of all, because I was a bit worried about that. Right, my next question is, we actually discussed this shortly before we started recording, so I won't walk into this one. But I was looking for issues around the MDF. Meros Development Fund, and I couldn't actually find any. And then before we got on here, I started gloating, how comes there's no issues on the MDF? And you said, well, there are. So what are the issues on the MDF? How comes I missed them? And do you think that more issues may surface after we try to use the MDF on the next testnet, which is actually scheduled?
So real quick, I am trying to pull up the issue about the MDF because I do know there is one, and so 1 second, I do want to pull this up.
No problem.
Author, no, I don't have the author saved. Let's see. It's none of these. It was probably just on the second or third page. We do have a lot of issues.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was on the third page, issue 148, proposal, block reward % for development team.
Okay.
It was by Bitcoins for Sale. Also known as Pedro, and he suggested we do a development fund, which led to the creation of MIP 001, and that issue has been open until the implementation of MIP 0001, which is the Meros Development Fund. So that's the open issue, and as I go to implement it, I may create a new issue for it that can more talk about implementation details and so on.
Hi, but
that is the open issue for it.
Yeah, is this another one of these that we spoke about at the start of the show, where it's kind of like a feature posing as an issue more than an actual issue?
Oh, definitely.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
It definitely is, and it's one of the few things I would say is blocking Meros from mainnet. I have a list of unimplemented features, like beyond the actual issues and a few missed features. I have a list of things that need to be done to launch. One being the RPC. One being something called the epochs review, one being checkpoints, and then the final thing is the Meros Development Fund.
Right, okay.
And that would be the things absolutely needed to launch. Oh, okay. And integrate the GUI, but I generally put that out of my mind.
So how is the Meros Development Fund, how is that part coming along? Do you feel that you've got a lot more coding to do on that before that is ready? Or do you feel that it's something...
It is not something I have started. I try to work on one issue, like one feature set at a time. So right now I'm working on the new RPC, and then I would probably move to the epochs redo and then checkpoints before finally doing the Meros Development Fund.
Okay, cool. I know it's a difficult thing to predict, but in your mind, do you have kind of like the architecture of how it's going to work kind of laid out already? Is it kind of a straightforward thing, or do you think it's something that you're going to have to sit down and think, okay, well, how are we going to implement this?
Well, of course, the formal spec is available. We have a Meros improvement proposal for it. It's something that I worked hard on and I'm very proud of. Even as a co-author, like I worked on that. I worked on it with someone else.
I don't know who that would have been.
It was actually helped by Plasma Power, who is a nano developer.
Okay.
And as much as I've tried to get him to properly work for Meros, no, we just have more of an association. We're good friends, don't get me wrong. But he also helped with ASMR. He
Yep.
helped with the cryptography on that, and then wrote the nano integration. And he also gave me a lot of feedback on this, which I really appreciate. So he's not a Meros developer. He's absolutely not saying Meros is better than Nano. No, I do truly try to respect Plasma Power's independence from the project, even though he has associated with Meros as a project in the past.
Yeah.
So he was actually the co-author who helped me write it. And so we do have the formal spec available, and I definitely do have ideas on the actual implementation of it, but it's still probably going to take a week or two, not to mention the testing for it, which is going to be the most painful part.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Because that was the reason why I formulated the question, because I thought there's probably going to be quite a few parts that could go wrong with the MDF.
Yes.
Okay.
And it definitely has to be extensively tested due to the scope of it. It's 4.7% of the total supply, which is a very notable number and not something as frequently tested as the rest of the distribution, which is just via proof of work.
Yeah, I've worked on quite a few projects that have had issues around that budget kind of development portion of their code base, and when things go wrong there, it can be quite a big deal. So I understand why you want to make sure you get that right. A commit I wanted to discuss completed the Hashsync test. Work on generating blocks for multi-verification test. This was another contributor called VyVyrn. I think this was their first contribution. It does have a commented explanation in the code, which I found quite helpful. But as we've got an expert here, we may as well get the most bang for our buck, as they say, and get you to explain to us what that commit was all about.
So I have a list of untested aspects of the protocol, which we've discussed before, and it's just talking about more and more testing, and VyVyrn was great enough to help out with some of them. So he worked on two of them, one being this Hashsync test, which is actually this one feature called it's relating to a block list. When we try to sync a Meros chain, like an entire blockchain from scratch, we request, hey, what's a list of the blocks? What blocks are we talking about? Where are they? Where are we going? And we get this info in what's called a block list. So we wanted to test that not only were the correct block list returned, but also some other properties to match the protocol. And he wrote that test and he named it the Hashsync test, and it works, and I'm actually very happy with it. And then he also started work on another test, which I actually finished before I merged his contribution, which is something I'm very thankful for.
Excellent. Moving on, I wanted to answer just a few more questions. We've gone through really quickly. This is going to be one of our shorter podcasts. Go ahead.
I do quickly want to say that they actually contributed some pretty great code, so I'm actually very thankful to them for doing so.
Awesome. Yeah, it's really good when developers do step up, and especially when they're talented. Because obviously I would love to step up, but yeah, exactly. So
I think we're good, Cryptosi. I think we're good.
So the next question I wanted to ask was I wanted to start discussing the actual launch of Meros, as it's coming a lot closer now. We can see it in the code, we can see it in the types of things that are being committed, the way you're handling issues, the way we're discussing the last parts of the puzzle, as it were. It's been a really good journey. As people get involved, we're getting people join Discord and say when mainnet, and the only way people will be able to mine or get their hands on Meros at the start, at the launch, is going to be through mining. Anyway, they'll be able to mine is through mining, which makes sense. What sorts of machines will people need to have for them to mine Meros? What kind of advice could you give to somebody who perhaps isn't that tech savvy, but they want to be involved in Meros? What should they do?
So with mining, it really depends on what computer you have, how long you're willing to mine before you get something, and how many other people exist. It's like a combination of those three things. Because you can take an old enough computer, and with enough time, it will mine a Bitcoin block.
When
You
you
just
say,
really have to keep at it.
yeah,
But
a couple
no,
of
that's
years we're
not
talking
feasible.
about, right? Okay.
Maybe a few thousand, maybe a few hundred, maybe a million. Really depends on the computer. I hear someone got an NES to mine Bitcoin and an original Game Boy, and they
Really?
did less than 1 hash per second. So there may be a few billion to trillion years involved with those
Yeah.
devices.
Okay.
Sorry to all the old school Pokemon fans. Um, but no, so it really depends on a few factors, of course. I expect a lot of Ryzen CPUs to be used, but if you have a gaming machine, even that's going to have a chance at the start, and I do mean a good chance. So if you're there at the start and want to try it out, I definitely recommend it. If you don't personally have a good computer, like a gaming machine, yet you do want to mine, you could always rent a VPS and mine on that. It depends on the terms of service. A lot of VPS companies don't allow mining, but you have that as an option.
What sort
If you
of
just want to get a computer in the race, or if you do want to get Meros and don't want to mine, then yes, we're discussing going to a market.
specs would the VPS have? What would you suggest would be a decent spec VPS for people to mine Meros on day one?
Uh, Really, you want to maximize the amount of CPU you can get, but a lot of the time the CPU and RAM are scaled together. So if you get 8 CPU cores, you may end up with 128 gigabytes of RAM, and you're not going to need that much for 8 CPU cores. If we're talking 8 cores, which in 16 threads in a VPS, you would want uh, 16 to 24 gigabytes of RAM for that. So that scaling does make VPSs not exactly cost efficient, but I'm sure there are some services which will let you customize and get a ton of CPU, but only 32 gigabytes of RAM. But it really is a CPU mined coin, so that's going to be the focus.
Okay, excellent. Um, I'm trying to think if there's anything else I'm missing from a mining point of view, but I guess
Sure.
that's it. Okay. Um, any more information on exchanges? Is there anything else you can
Uh,
share on what sort of exchanges Meros will be available on?
well, I've actually talked with the community and you about this, and the consensus is kind of it's not necessary to be on an exchange at launch, and it also isn't necessarily optimal because not only does it not give the coin time to breathe, but it can create expectations from the start, which aren't necessarily beneficial. So really what we're looking at early on is going to be an OTC market. And I have had no hand in that, and the Meros server itself will not handle OTC just due to liability and how much it distracts from the actual discussion of the coin. I know a lot of community members know of one OTC server. I'm not sure what it is, but I've seen a couple go around Discord, including one I've frequently seen and I've also seen recommended. So I'm sure there will be some OTC server which picks us up, and I'll probably join there myself and try to get some Meros. Um,
So do you
but
actually?
yeah, no.
So do you feel
Oh,
like
sorry. Go ahead.
do you feel like even though you're the chief creator, I'll call you, you're the chief creator or orchestrator of Meros's development at launch, you don't feel like you'll be one of the most important miners at the time of launch?
I definitely will be a miner. I'm not sure about most important. I may have a couple of good computers as for my work,
Hmm.
but that doesn't. I can't mine on my laptop just because I need to use my laptop day to day. Yes, I could mine overnight. Don't get me wrong. I would be doing that. Um, but during the day, I am not going to be able to mine at a competitive level just because I'm also going to be working on Meros and doing things. And then I have a couple older computers I can definitely use, but just because I'm mining and getting some doesn't mean I can't want more Meros.
Okay, yeah, that's just fair.
If I'm mining even 5%, if I'm mining say 20% of blocks, which would be a large number, it's 1 out of every 5. Why can't I want 30% of Meros? No, I don't want so much of the supply, but I definitely want to pick some up.
Mhm.
Turns out I believe in this. Been here for a few years now.
See, I think it's I don't want to turn into one of those presenters that starts shilling, but I think it's quite interesting that even though you've developed Meros, you're gonna have to scramble like the rest of us to try and get your hands on some. So I think that's
I mean, we talked earlier beyond my own personal mining. We talked because I do think I'll probably I'll mine a few blocks. I'm sure about that. But we also talked about the Meros Development Fund, which is meant to reward developers, and would be lying if I said I didn't think the majority of the first round would go to me. But there's a couple other people I know. I think even you wanted to get in on the Meros
Oh yeah.
Development Fund, the first round. So I don't expect myself to get 100%. But
Yeah.
no, I do also think I'll be able to get stuff from there. So even without a pre-mine, I don't think Meros as a project will leave me hanging entirely. But
I just think
that doesn't mean I can't want to buy some.
no, but
Check out the experience.
I just
How can I recommend OTC if I've never done it?
that's a good point. I just really enjoy the fact that you're on a level playing field with the rest of us. I think I feel a bit bad for you because it kind of maybe a little bit unfair, but then at the same time it is quite funny.
It's
so
not unfair. It's perfectly fair.
I guess it is actually perfectly fair, right? Okay, it's unusual, I should say. Um, any more? Are we any closer to the? Well, I guess we are closer. Can you put a date
We're
on the
always getting
next?
closer.
Yes, but the next test net. Are we closer to being able to pin down when the next test net will be?
We're always closer, but no, I don't really have any more info for you at this time, Cryptosi.
Okay. Right then. Well, in that case, I guess unless there's anything else you wanted to say, I will begin my wrap-up speech.
Just the usual. It's been great to be here. A lot of exciting stuff is coming up. I'm hoping to have the new RPC done within a week or so. So, like by the time this would go live. And honestly, I would hope that development of Meros to be kind of done, quote unquote, with the core protocol by end of April is too optimistic, but there is still a month or two of development here, but it's something I'm working as hard as I can on, and I am very hopeful for our future. So
yeah, I think this is the first time we've had such a clear and concise light at the end of the tunnel, even though it's not really been a tunnel, well, not for me. But now we know there are these four things which still remain to be completed.
I wouldn't even count the GUI as one. So
are you worried about the GUI? Getting the GUI done?
No, I don't think it will be too hard to integrate. I do think I do know I have to expand it for like the Meros Development Fund, so it needs to be updated, but I don't think it will be too hard to integrate once we have the new RPC done.
Yeah,
that is the kicker. We need the new RPC done.
Yeah. That's exactly what I was thinking. Because of the way front ends are kind of moving forward with all of this like web-based technology, it's kind of things are getting a little bit better. So okay, right. So Kayaba, thank you very, very much for your time. Once again, congratulations on the new haircut, looking more and more like a star that you're destined to be. And thank you your transparency, and thank you for answering all of my questions and for keeping us all in the loop and for working so hard towards this project, which is a real retro cryptocurrency. We are all very grateful, and I personally have really been enjoying this journey. It's been great fun. So for those of you that have reached the end, I usually say congratulations, but I'm looking at the timer, it's not even 40 minutes. So this one, I don't know how we've gotten through it so quickly.
Don't you generally like 30-minute episodes?
No, I've started to like the hour episodes, actually. I listen to the hour episodes.
Well, I'm happy to hear that.
Yeah, when I'm driving the car. And I feel like you get a little bit more time to get into it. The 30-minute ones were kind of like you'd get into it and then it'd be like, okay, yeah, thanks, bye. And I think the hour ones, I was starting to get into the hour ones. Now here we are, 40 minutes. So yeah, I usually say congratulations for reaching the end, but obviously now there's no such.
You can still say that.
I don't think they've earned it, to be honest with you. I think 40 minutes is.
Imagine demeriting a community as such.
Yeah.
My community. How dare you?
I will. I'm gonna say it. You guys haven't earned it. So make sure you hit the like button and subscribe and share this amongst all of your friends.
We will have to rediscuss our exclusivity clause with you. Not like we have one. But...
Not like we even have one, yeah. Can we get one? Can we put that in paper?
We don't even have any contracts, so...
We don't. But we have been doing this consistently for over 2 years without any even hint of a break. Yeah, it's literally like we'll be messaging each other. So when are we doing the next podcast? Because that's the best thing that we have in our lives.
Yeah,
I know, right? So so thank you for listening, though, because we do appreciate all of our listeners and all the people that get involved. If you have any questions that you wanted to pose, I didn't add any this month, but for next month I'm going to make sure I add some. So jump into the Discord, link is in the description. There's a channel there called State of the Project, or you can just ask in the main project, in the main lounge area. I'll probably see it and pick it up.
Don't encourage that.
Uh,
We have a channel for it. Just
yeah,
go
but
to the State of the Project channel and post your questions there.
do you know what? I don't really like when the channel police come in. Oh, you can't ask that in this channel. You gotta go to that channel.
Well,
So
it's not like no. There's a difference between having a police force for it, and there's a difference between flat out encouraging it and saying it's okay. We shouldn't encourage it. We shouldn't say it's okay. But if it does happen, we'll just let them know, hey, there's a channel, but we noted your question. So you want to do a friendly push. I'm not going to delete a message for being off topic like that.
I feel like
somewhat off topic.
I've woken up today and I've chosen anarchy. So if you want to go into any channel you like, no, I'm only joking. So yeah, it would be optimal.
Let's just encourage people to go to the State of the Project channel. Just slightly funnel them.
Oh yeah, go to the State of the Project channel. If you come to our Discord, if you go to another Discord and start asking questions about Meros, that would probably be quite cool. Feel free to do that too.
I do not want to have that drama on my hands. Don't just go randomly.
We call that shilling.
Respect communities.
We call that shilling. Yeah. Go to Dash, go to Pivex, and just start shouting Meros, Meros. Tell them Kayaba sent you. Okay, right, we've done we've done enough mucking around for the end of one episode. Kayaba, thank you very much for your time. I'm really looking forward to the next time we get to meet up on camera and in audio form for those listening in audio, because I know there's going to be so much more new stuff for us to discuss and to really dig into. So thank you very much. Thank you to everyone listening. Once again, please like, subscribe, and share and all of that stuff. And we will see you all next month.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.